Welcome back to another compelling episode of Soul Sparks with Saima. Here, real stories ignite real transformation, and today I'm joined by our amazing guest, Alan Lazaros, a voice shaped by resilience, introspection, and an unshakable devotion to inner mastery. From early loss to a near fatal car accident that recalibrated his purpose, Alan now stands as a beacon for anyone striving to elevate both success and self worth. So, together we'll explore what it truly means to optimize life, not just for achievement, but for fulfillment that endures. So, Alan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I find it an honor to speak into the lives of others. I started a little company 10 years ago, 11 years ago now, actually, called Alan Lazaros LLC, What You'll Never Learn in School But Desperately Need to Know. And I wanted to bring self improvement, personal growth, and personal development to the masses. And in the
Mhm.
beginning, it was crickets, and no one really wanted to hear from me. So I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're warmly welcome. It's my honor to have you, Alan. So, Alan, I would like to ask you that, what does fulfillment mean to you at this stage of your life, especially after all the emotional and physical turning points you have experienced?
Yeah. So I think fulfillment is the word that I believe is most optimal for someone to orient their life around. I think we all can sit here and talk about like what is the point of life, and it's known as an existentialist. An existentialist is someone who contemplates their own existence, and they contemplate their place in the world, and they try to understand themselves, others in the world, and they're constantly asking questions and trying to understand. And the best metaphor that I have for this is if you've ever played chess. It's a very famous game, board game. And I always used to say this. I used to say, if you go into the world unaware, it's like trying to be successful against the greatest chess masters in the world when you don't even know what the pieces do. So,
Mhm.
what I think we should be aiming at is meaning and fulfillment. And so, what does fulfillment mean to me at this stage? I believe fulfillment is actually a byproduct. It's an effect, not a cause, of alignment with your highest self. Obviously, on this podcast, soul sparks, soul speakers. The the idea here is, what does your soul call you to? What's meaningful work for you? And I think that if you look at people's lives, a large majority of where we invest our life, our time and effort is at work. And whatever you call work, you can call it career, you can call it calling, you can call it mission, you can call it work, you can call it a job. And there's a great quote, some people have a job, some people have a career, some people have a calling. And I think a calling is something deeper and something bigger. And it means that you're really living for something more than yourself, and your work is both meaningful and fulfilling. And so a lot of us fall into what I call the pleasure trap. If I eat this donut, then I'll have pleasure, then I'll feel good for a moment, but then it will, I'll need another donut soon. Versus fulfillment is lasting. Fulfillment is who you become, growth, contribution, meaning, and fulfillment. And fulfillment is a byproduct of the things we do and don't do. I think fulfillment is also a byproduct of virtue and challenge and growth and all these things that maybe are hard in the moment, but are deeply meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for breaking that down. And the way you frame fulfillment as a byproduct instead of a destination is such a grounded and refreshing perspective, Alan. It really shows that how much inner work and life experience have shaped the way you move through life now. And I think listeners will really appreciate your redefining fulfillment on your terms rather than chasing an external idea of it. And just to clarify that this podcast is named Soul Sparks. Now, building on that, like you often speak about a hard drive and yet no, like the approach. So how do you personally balance compassion with discipline without sleeping into extremes?
Yeah, so I realize now that the room that you hosted, it says Soul Spakers instead of Soul Sparks. So it is Soul Sparks. That makes way more sense. I looked in the upper left and I saw that the room was spelled wrong. So I apologize for that.
Okay, okay.
Um,
Yeah, I have.
but what was that last question again?
So like you often speak about a hard driving yet no nonsense approach. So how do you personally balance compassion with discipline without sleeping into extremes?
Yeah, so I think that life is a harmony between two extremes. I think life is
Mhm.
full of duality and triality and quadrality. So, for example, duality is holding two seemingly opposing ideas in your consciousness simultaneously. A lot of people know yin and yang, that kind of idea, order and chaos, good and dark, or light and dark, good and evil, that whole thing. But ultimately, I think that if you want to be fulfilled and if you want to be successful in whatever that means to you and you want to live a great life, you have to learn how to reconcile some of these dualities. And people always say, well, you should work smart, not hard. And the truth of the matter is, you need to work hard first and then beat your head against the wall until you eventually learn how to work smart. So it's always an and not an or. It's called the genius of the and or the power of the and. I'm going to work hard and smart. I'm going to have virtue and some vice, but I'm going to try to err on the side of virtue. I'm going to try to live in the light, but also have to face the dark. And I think that that's kind of the no BS approach that you mentioned in your question is I am going to live in the light, but I'm not going to be naive to the dark. I am going to be disciplined and I'm also going to have fun too. I'm going to aim at the highest good that I can conceptualize and believe in. And I'm going to also enjoy myself and be selfish too. And I think it's not full selflessness, it's not full selfishness, it's this harmonizing of the two. Why can't what's good for me also be good for you, also be good for the world, also be good for your listeners? I try to find the win-win-win-win-win-win-win scenario, and I think that that's what life is about. I think it's harmonizing all of these dualities in an upward trajectory to ensure that you leave the world a better place and be the change that you wish to see in the world. So to bring this more practical, you asked about how do I not slip into extremes? I think that the idea of an optimal stopping problem is something that is not taught in school, and I think it should be. So there's a book called Algorithms to Live By. It's a computer scientist's approach to decision making. It's a extremely boring book, but I love it. And most people find it boring, but I love it. And in the book, they talk about an optimal stopping problem. And for those of you who don't know what an optimal stopping problem is, it's this idea that everything has an optimal max to it. So in the book, they use the metaphor of you're going to a concert, and the closer you get to the venue, the less likely there's a parking spot. So when do you park? What's the optimal stopping problem? So you want to get as close to the venue as possible, but the closer you get to the venue, the less likely there's an available spot. That kind of thing. And so they found mathematically that the time to park is at 34% or 0.34. And what does that mean for practicality for those of you who aren't engineers like me? Basically, what it means is if you put the nachos in for 3.5 minutes, they burn. If you put them in for 30 seconds, the cheese isn't melted and they're gross. But the truth is, as funny as that might be, that's how everything is. Even in this moment, there's an optimal stopping problem that I've probably passed for taking too many words to explain this concept. You There's always an optimal answer to every goal, to every problem, to every question. But the problem is you get closer and closer and closer and closer and closer to optimal without ever actually getting there. So how do I not fall into extremes to answer your original question? I am constantly trying to optimize and find the harmony between extremes for a common goal that is not only good for me, but also good for others.
I really appreciate the way you explain that, Alan. It really highlights that, the intentionality behind how you show up at the mix of compassion and discipline is something a lot of people struggle with. And hearing how you navigate the balance makes it feel much more human and attainable. And it's really clear that how you operate from both honesty and heart without letting one overshadow the other. So, have you ever caught yourself learning too far into one side, and how did you recalibrate?
Yeah, of course, all the time. Well, I think life it works kind of like a pendulum. You overswing and then you swing back and then you overswing and then you swing back and we teach this in group coaching. We've done a group coaching program for 20 groups now every quarter for 5 years. And in group coaching, I try to draw this out. I have this digital notebook called The Remarkable, so I'll try to articulate it with my words instead of drawing it out, which will be much harder. But if you picture someone being born, we are all born naked, scared, and ignorant. We don't really know ourselves. We don't know the world, and we don't know others yet. We don't know psychology or physiology or neuroscience. We don't know the economy. We don't know how success works. We don't know how to achieve our needs. We have to be fed. We're like these useless little blobs. And that's okay. All of us start there. But then you go out into the world and you have experiences and you have goals and you learn how to go to school and meet other friends and get your heart broken. And so what happens is we swing from extreme to extreme. And this is kind of the metaphor. For like a little boy growing up, for example, it's like, okay, well, I like hanging out with boys, so we're gonna go play sports. And then you get beat up and you're like, you know what, screw boys, I'm gonna go hang out with girls. And then you get your heart broken. And then you're like, okay, screw girls, I'm gonna be alone. And then you're alone. And then you go back to boy. It's we're constantly just swinging this pendulum back and forth. And I think that the swinging never stops, but I think we're less extreme with it. So when I was a kid, I could go from super pumped and happy as hell to so upset, screaming in my pillow in my room alone. And those mood swings are very drastic. But then as you get older and you mature, you hopefully swing still because you got to keep swinging because that's what life is about. You got to keep experiencing things, but hopefully you don't swing as far. Right. So the first time I got rejected when I asked a girl to dance isn't going to be, that's going to be way more devastating than if I ask, a girl to dance now. And I don't ask a girl to dance now because I'm in a relationship, but you understand what I'm saying. So the way to have I number one, have I ever gone too far to one extreme? Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, repeatedly. However, personal growth, I think, is two things. One, you swing. So if you start out going from 0 to 10, and then eventually it's 1 and 9, and then eventually it's 2 and 8, and then eventually it's 7 and 3, and then eventually it's 6 and 4, and eventually you're swinging right around 5. And at Next Level University, our podcast and our company, we call this the drive to 5, which means you're centered, you're stoic, you're mature, you're feeling your feelings, but you're not letting them run you. You're logical and rational, but you also have feelings. And this is sort of the center point of the dualities that I talked about earlier that I try to live in. So I try not to get too crazy, over the moon excited about anything, but I also don't let myself get too dark and too down in the dumps either. Whereas when I was in high school, it would be these huge swings of like, yeah, I had the most fun I've ever had last night of all time. We drank, we partied, we made it rain. And then the next day I'm super hungover and I hate myself, right? So it's I think maturity is learning how to, number one, live in the messy middle, knowing that everyone's life is the messy middle. And number two, learning how to do it better and more effectively and more consistently and to keep swinging, but maybe your swings just aren't so extreme.
I really appreciate how honestly you describe that, Alan, and the idea that you describe that we are always, shifting and learning, and that recalibration comes from through staying engaged with real experiences gives a lot of depth to the way you approach growth, and your work with group coaching clearly shows that how dynamic that process is, both for you and the people you guide. So, after coaching thousands, what pattern do you see most often in people who are outwardly successful but internally empty?
Yeah, so I have 11,761 hours of coaching, training, and podcasting. I call it my magic number. And coaching is one on one, training is one to several, and then podcasting is one to scale. And all of them are of value, but I prefer coaching personally. So most of my hours are in coaching one on one people from all over the world, all different cultures, all different backgrounds, all different countries. So there's 195 countries on planet Earth. There's 8 billion plus people on planet Earth. Where you live, India is actually the largest population of any country on the planet. That actually just surpassed China this year. And at the end of the day, what you learn from learning from so many people, because I learn from all my clients as well as guiding them as well. And what you find are these patterns of principles that apply to all of us, but the way we apply them is different. So your specific question was essentially, what have I noticed in terms of people that are externally successful but internally unfulfilled, in its simplest form, I noticed that their life and their work is not oriented around meaning. It's mostly status and social validation, and a lot of times that leaves them feeling very empty. So health, wealth, and love, like real physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health. Wealth is how you earn your money, how much you earn, is that increasing or decreasing, at what rate, and then where you invest it. And then love is your intimate relationship, immediate family, extended family, friends, colleagues, clients, mentors, mentees, that kind of thing. And what you find is people who are really successful externally but internally unfulfilled is you find that their compass is off. AKA, there's two worlds we all have to live in. The first one is the real world, which is our world, which is the behind the scenes, who you are and what you are when no one's watching. That is
Mhm.
the world that matters most, in my opinion. But unfortunately, in high school, this is a good example. And for young kids, this is often what we fall victim to, is the way I describe the real world and the social world, the two worlds we all have to live in. The social world is the wedding photos. The real world is the actual marriage. That's a good way to think about it. And so we all have to live in both, obviously, right? The economy is predicated on your brand and your reputation, and you have 1,000 reputations, but only one character. So who I am and what I am when no one's watching is very different than what a lot of people who just watch one episode of my podcast might think. I like to believe that I'm better behind the scenes than anything I could possibly show publicly. But unfortunately, and I've met enough of my heroes to know this, that is not the case with most people. So, as someone who grew up without a father, my birth father passed away when I was 2, and my stepfather left when I was 14. I was looking for a male role model growing up, and I had a lot of heroes, and I've met many of them, and a lot of them have really let me down. And what I mean by that is their perception from the outside looking in was far greater than their character from the inside out. And to me that was very depressing, but I'm 37 now, and it's time for me to grow up and be the hero of my own story, be my own male role model. And ultimately, we all have to figure out how to get the syntax right. So syntax means the order of importance, the priority. So priority 1 is the real world, who you are and what you are when no one's watching, meaning and purpose and skills and real life. Priority 2 can be social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, blah, 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 blah. So, but if you put the social world first, you're in so much trouble and you will be wildly unfulfilled. And trust me, because I had a short time in my life where I did that and I was super unfulfilled, even though I was very successful appearing from the outside in. So, status and shiny objects and success from the outside in is not nearly as valuable, in my honest opinion, at this stage of my life as it is from the inside out. So, I think real success and real fulfillment need to be built from the inside out, not the outside in. And obviously, they're both important, but it needs to be the correct syntax.
That's such a powerful way to put it, Alan. And I really appreciate that how clearly you draw the line between outward reputation and inner alignment. It's something people feel, but really know how to articulate. But the way you describe the difference between the image we project and who we are when no one's watching really lands. It shows that just how deeply you have observed human behavior through your coaching work. And you're right, the Chinese status, like you said, the Chinese status symbols lose their glow quickly, when there's no meaning behind them. And hearing you explain it with this level of honesty and clarity adds so much value to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And thank you for having me. This has been awesome. I would come back anytime. Just let me know.
You're warmly welcome all the time, Alan. So thank you, Alan, once more for sharing such profound clarity and that this conversation reminds us that fulfillment isn't an accident. It's a It's a deliberate architecture built through awareness, courage, and alignment. And to everyone listening out there, if today's dialogue stirred something within you, let that spark lead you to action and reassess your priorities, question your narratives, and dare to craft a life that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside. Your next level of fulfillment begins